don't know like the normal life anymore.
I know. Mum is used to having like her two dogs in on the meetings now. She's got two golden retrievers, so they're like regulars on their weekly meetings.
This is like new technology, isn't it? It's quite exciting. Quite exciting.
Yeah.
I'm quite loving it, you know. Part of me, I was thinking of last night that what should we talk tomorrow? So, I mean, normally these are all unscripted.
Yeah. I listened.
Whatever comes up, you know, whatever comes up.
Mm-hmm. I listened to your podcast with Sarah just before this one. I put it on in the background while I was like cleaning and stuff. It was really interesting. Her whole background, I didn't finish it because it's very long. I think I got like 50 minutes in. But yeah, really, really interesting. And I know what you mean. I like how it's unscripted and it just kind of flows and it goes like that. So yeah.
People are saying that, the podcasts are really long. But the problem is I really want to tell the story.
Yeah.
And you just cannot tell the story in 15 minutes or 20 minutes.
And I think it's good. My favorite thing about podcasts is you don't need to sit down and watch something for that length of time. You can put it on in the background when you're driving or cleaning or cooking or whatever. It's one of those things that you just listen to. I really, really like podcasts for that reason.
I mean, with me, it's like writing a short story. So we are writing a short story. If someone watches it, the full thing, then they will say, yeah, I read a story.
Yeah.
So like my perception about podcast is something else. So we're actually writing a story here.
Okay. I hope it's interesting enough.
But I mean, it's like, you know, it's like filmmaking, isn't it? Every film has got its own kind of audience.
Yeah, definitely.
So as long as we are happy, so we'll be fine. So the plan is, I mean, we'll cover, you know, a bit of background, you know. I can say that our guest today is Samantha Buck.
Hi, thank you for having me.
You have got a middle name as well.
Elaine, yeah.
Elaine. I mean, normally in our country, in our culture, we don't have actually middle name. But my daughters have middle name for some reasons. I don't know. So we try to make their names more international rather than, you know, any. So that's part of my ideological views about the world.
Interesting.
Socialist, internationalist.
No, my name is quite traditional. I am Elaine the fourth in my family. My great grandmother was Elaine, and then my grandmother was Judith Elaine. My mother is Judith Elaine, and I'm Samantha Elaine. So it's just kind of flowed through the family.
Good. You were born in America.
Yeah, I was born in Houston, Texas.
Okay. Tell us about Houston a bit.
It's a very multicultural city. I'm pretty sure it's the most multicultural city in the United States, which I think surprises a lot of people because when you think of Texas, you don't think of diverse or multicultural or anything like that. But Houston is very big, very similar to Texas. Texas is huge. The UK can fit into Texas 3 times. So, I mean, that's just a mental image of how big Texas actually is. And Houston, in comparison, is also extremely large. I think you can drive for 2 hours and still be in Houston, the city. So, yeah, and it's very multicultural. I mean, it's a big oil city, so very Republican, pretty conservative, depending on where you are. So I would say the suburbs are more conservative, but the more downtown you get, it's a lot more liberal. And I think that's very true for like any city or state in America. But yeah, I mean, it's a great city. I probably wouldn't want to live there, but I do love going back.
Does it mean like you're either of your parents were from actually Houston as well?
Yeah, so my mom was born and raised in Houston, Texas, and so was my grandmother. But my dad is actually Welsh, so I'm double national, American and British.
And then you ended up in Scotland, not in Scotland, but in Orkney.
Yes, so Orkney is where I've lived since 2011, I think. We moved there because my mum originally worked in an oil service company for many years, which had us moving around a lot. And then she decided to take a change and go into renewable energies. And she wanted to go and get her master's. So Harriet Watt, which is based in Edinburgh, do a master's for renewable energies out of Orkney, because Orkney is a really great place for tidal and wave renewable energies. And it's kind of like the hub of renewables in Scotland right now. It's kind of like the forefront of everything that's happening. So we moved up there so Mum could do her 1-year-long master's, and we've been there ever since.
Wow.
Actually, the history is a lot more clear because I was just been applying for masters, and they require you to put every country that you've been resident in. So I had to go through a lot of family history trying to figure out when and where we were moving because I was so young. But we moved to Mexico, to a small town called Poza Rica, when I was 1 year old, I would say, roughly. And then after that, we moved to Denver, Colorado, which is in America. And then we moved to a small suburb outside of Houston in Texas again. We were there for like a year. And then we moved to Bogota, Colombia. And then we moved to Mexico City. And then we moved to Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. And then we moved to Orkney.
So my initial idea about you is a bit kind of now debunked.
Yeah.
So you stayed in Colombia. How long?
I want to say from when I was 6.5 till about 8. So a year and a half, maybe.
Okay. So America, Colombia, Malaysia.
And it was interesting because I would live in these different countries and I always had different school systems in each country. So in Colombia, I went to a British school. So it was British style. It had like houses and uniforms and things that I wasn't really used to in the American or Mexican school systems. And then when we moved to Mexico City again, that was an American school foundation. It was called ASF. And then in Malaysia, it was an international school system. So it was very different. It was hard to kind of like keep on track, making sure that I was like learning the same stuff.
So basically you were very young and you were moving around with your parents wherever they were going. How did you feel about that? Did you feel angry? Did you feel, or just like it happened?
It was so part of who I was and what my life was just like. I kind of never thought anything. I think it started becoming hard when I was like 9 or 10. And I think I'm really grateful that I got to do all of my moving before I was 11, because then when I was 11 and 12, that's when I moved to Orkney. And then I had a really stable, I was there for 6-7 years before I went off to university. So it's been really nice having that kind of base for those formative years. But then I still have that history of moving around really internationally. And I was just, I became very adaptable to situations and circumstances and people as well. It made me really independent. And I think it definitely made me grow up. I was always surrounded by adults. I was a single child until I was 10 when my mom had my little sister. So I was always around my mom and her friends and, you know, her work. If she had to go to work dinners, I would come too. So those kind of like situations made me grow up a lot faster, I think, than other kids. But I never resented having to move. It was always, my mom made it fun. I think because it was always her job that had us moving, which is, I think when people hear that I moved around a lot, their initial response is, oh, so like, what did your dad do? And I have to correct them and say, oh no, actually it was my mom's job that had us moving around. And my dad was just fortunate enough to have a job where he could live anywhere because he worked offshore. So it was a really perfect dynamic, I think, between them and just our family. So, but my mom was really good with including both me and my dad in the moving process, because even though it was kind of out of our hands, he would always choose the homes that we would live in, and I would come and like view schools that I would be going to, so that I felt involved in the process and not just, you know, like plucked out of one country, plopped into another with like no control.
Did you have any good memories from like places like Colombia, like Bogota?
I mean, like
How old
I
were
didn't
you
really,
then?
like, I was mostly 7 years old when I was there. So I have very like scattered memories in Bogota. The first memory that comes to mind is the apartment building that we lived in. You had to give your thumbprint to enter the building.
Oh my God.
And I remember when I was little, I just thought that was the coolest, like, sci-fi kind of thing. Now that I'm older and I understand the situation that Colombia is in and has been in, I realize it was very much safety restrictions. But those kind of things were cool. But because we lived in all these amazing countries, and I'm so privileged and grateful that I was able to experience all these things at such a young age. We really took advantage of it. So like every other weekend we would drive around and go to different towns or different places in and around the place that we were living, because we never took holidays as a family. We didn't do like summer vacations or winter vacations, because our whole life felt like a holiday. We were traveling the world, and we would get to see new places and cultures and that kind of stuff. So it was really, really great.
When did you guys go to Malaysia?
When I was 9 until I was 11.
Okay. So you have a bit clearer memory there from Malaysia.
Yeah, Malaysia. That's where my little sister was born. She was born in KL. So, and that was kind of when my mom was kind of on the fence. I think she knew that she started hearing more about renewables and started reading more, and was like, okay, this is the path that I really want to go down. And she started toying with the idea, and then she got pregnant with my little sister. And I think 6 months after she was born or something like that, her company had come to her and said, okay, we have a new place we want you to move to, Abu Dhabi. And that was when my dad was like, nope. He really did not like the idea of leaving his 3 girls alone in Abu Dhabi while he was at work. So, and I think that was like the one time he was able to use his veto power for my mom's job. So then she thought, okay, well, this is the perfect opportunity for me to explore another avenue. Malaysia was really fun because it was, hot all year round. Our apartment complex had a pool outside. So, Malaysia was just really fun for me. I have a lot of good memories from there. And I mean, the same with Mexico. I absolutely loved living in Mexico. I loved the people. I would say that's probably my favorite country that I've lived in terms of like the culture and the people and the language. I really, really loved it.
From the very early age, you actually became kind of multicultural. This way, that way.
Yeah.
And more or less you kind of like embraced those things. It just became part of you.
Yeah, it was weird because I couldn't really understand concepts such as nationality or somebody's identity that wasn't just who they are, racial identity, cultural identity, those kind of things I couldn't really comprehend them at a young age because I didn't have a strong identity of who I was, because I was so adaptable. I felt like my identity was constantly changing depending on where I lived and who I was, speaking to, what language I was speaking in that country. So I constantly felt like a fluid identity in terms of like cultural and national and all that kind of stuff. So I think that was kind of difficult for me, especially racial identity as a kid. Kids aren't taught at a very early age what racial segregation is, or, that people are different races. And because I grew up predominantly, in a lot of cases, I was the only white kid in a lot of the classes. I didn't really understand how, white people were the ones that were controlling other racial groups. I couldn't really understand that because I would look around and I was like, well, there's more of them than there are of us. That doesn't make sense. So, I mean, those kind of like concepts were hard to learn, but definitely important. And like, I'm so grateful for the upbringing that I had, because it definitely put me where I am today and, my interests and everything like that.
So you came to Dundee University. From Orkney. Looks like Orkney did well for you, isn't it? Really
well, yeah. I think it grounded me in a way that I didn't know I needed, with forming relationships with people. I always grew up, in the back of my mind, I always knew that the relationships I was forming with these new people was only going to last a year or two. And I don't think I realized that I was doing that. But when I went to Orkney, it was a bit of an awakening where I had to realize, okay, I need to make these relationships and I need to make them last. And it grounded me definitely in a way that kind of woke me up to, okay, don't step on people's toes too much, and don't, like, these are the people that you're going to be with for a very long time. And I was really lucky to find an amazing group of friends that I'm still just as close with when we were 14 to now. So it's really been really, really good.
Good. Just give me some idea, like, how many people live there in that island?
The last time I checked, so it's called the Orkney Islands, plural, because there's a lot of different small islands. So there's the mainland of Orkney, which is where the majority of people live. And then there's a lot of different small isles, which is what they're called. Very, very small population in those. But I think all of the Orkney Islands together is about 24,000 people. So
24,000 people. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And I'm pretty sure that on the mainland, it's about 15,000, I want to say. So about 10,000 people scattered around on the smaller islands, I think. I could be wrong. The last time I checked was a while ago. So
Okay. So that's not too bad. So, I mean, when you moved to like Dundee, it did not feel too much, out of place.
No, not really. I think Dundee was a really good city for me because I lived in KL, which is a huge, huge city. And I think I grew up, and at all the cities that I kind of lived in, I grew up with street smart. You just have to understand what it's like living in a big city, how to stay safe, those kind of things. But then I had like 6 years of really comfortable, plush living in Orkney. So I think it was a slight shock to the system just coming to a city. Little things like ordering takeaways any night that you want and it just comes to your door, like that really excited me as a fresher. So I did a lot of takeaway food and just like shopping, those kind of things that aren't available on the island, that now that I was living in a big city, it was really exciting. So I think it took me like a year before I like settled down and was actually really comfortable in Dundee. But I think it would have been really overwhelming if I had gone to Glasgow or something in my first year. Just because, Orkney is such a, you don't lock your doors at night. You leave your car keys in the car. It's that kind of place. It's extremely safe and extremely comfortable, but you have to learn if you want to leave.
I asked this question to my other guest. Kind of like obligatory questions. How do you think, looking back, how do you think your parents, formed your understanding about the world from the early age? Any memories? Did you guys talk about, it looks like America is very, very political society.
Yeah, definitely. In terms of how my dad traveled a lot. He was, his rotation was usually a month on, a month off. So I think a lot of my memories are focused around my mother, in no fault of his. It's just, the time that I spent with her was just happened to be more than my father. So, and we had a really good relationship because I was an only child for 10 years. That was a long time where it was just me and my mom. And she definitely treated me like an equal in a lot of ways. She didn't talk down to me. She didn't lie to me about things. When we would move to new countries and I would ask questions about the people or the things that were happening, she was really honest with me about those kind of things. And I really, really respect that. And I'm glad that she kind of treated me in that way, that I didn't feel like lesser than her. I felt, and it also made me comfortable speaking to other adults because I was so comfortable speaking to my mom about things that when other adults came about, I was really comfortable to just talk to them the same way that I spoke to her and the same way that I would speak to my friends as a kid.
I met you when you were in third year. I found you very adult at that time.
Yeah.
So your thought process, your understanding about, the surroundings, your idea about your future career, you were quite advanced in your thought processes.
Yeah. That's definitely, it's a product of how I was brought up for sure. I think being constantly surrounded, and it was one of those things that I was constantly surrounded by adults, but I didn't mind. I actually much preferred, like, if my mom had her friends over who had children my age, she would bring them over so that I could play with their kids, but then I would just end up sitting with my mom and her friends while they had coffees and chatted, because I was just like, I'd much rather sit and just listen to what the grown-ups in the room have to say, because I was just so interested in that. I was still a kid. I did like to play and stuff. I wasn't like a snooty, mature little kid, but it was definitely a product of just the environment that I grew up in, and yeah, definitely.
Because like one of the things, like, I mean, in my last podcast with like Sarah was saying that, I mean, when you come to university, it's not all about, getting good grades, but the other things you do, I mean. And one of the things I noticed, you were involved with lots of other things. You were involved in charity work. These are important. You need to do those things so that you have a kind of like decent CV, so that people know that, I mean, this girl worked those places. She knew those kind of surroundings. I think, do you think that's very American as well? I found that the American students love those, extracurricular things, lots of things.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that, because I was actually speaking to somebody yesterday about how in a lot of American high schools and colleges, you're required to do a certain amount of hours of voluntary work to qualify, and you can get extra credit in your classes for that. So if you are involved in like a module, maybe that's like 60 credits, you could maybe rack up an extra 15 credits, which would then take it off of another module by doing voluntary work. And if you do it for so many hours and you do it really well, it like comes into your grades. So like, I think volunteering and that kind of social outreach mentality, I would say, is definitely ingrained in like American education. But I was never in that education for a long enough time to say that kind of impacted me. I think it was just, I always knew that I wanted to be doing something. I don't like sitting still ever. So like, I would have so much free time throughout my week. I would be involved in like some social clubs and then some sports committees. But then I was like, oh, well, I have all this free time. Let's figure out what I can do.
Because like part of me, like the way I knew you, it looks like even when you were writing your dissertation with me, it seems like your mother played a big role in your, ideas about the world.
Yeah, definitely.
We should talk about, like working other areas as well while you were in the university. So perhaps like she influenced some of your understanding about, how to build up, like future.
Yeah, I think I'm really interested in voluntary work. And I have been for quite a while. And she always said that the best way to spend your time is by helping somebody else. And I think when I was a kid and she would say that, I would kind of roll my eyes and be like, yeah, whatever, but it wasn't until I was older that I really, it's really true. When you help somebody else, it feels so good. And I know that kind of, is there such thing as an unselfish deed? Because if it makes you feel good, is it really unselfish? Whatever. But I see it now. I do think that the best way to spend your time is by helping somebody else, because in turn, it's helping yourself, it's helping your community, it's helping just humanity for the betterment of society and just humankind, I think.
Tell us a bit more about you. You were involved in like Dundee Women's Centre, isn't it?
Yeah, so it was Dundee International Women's Centre that I started volunteering at in 2019. And I had just looked up, volunteer opportunities in Dundee. And there was a lot of stuff with like mental health. And there was a lot of stuff to do with, what was the other thing? And I think it was like drug rehabilitation. Those were the two main charities. There was a lot of charities that were based on both of those type of things. And I think they kind of work very closely together for sure. And then I found Dundee International Women's Centre, which is they started in 1971, and it's a independent organization. So they just started up from the ground up. And they pretty much provide a center for women who are predominantly from Black and ethnic minority groups to come and take classes, to take social groups, to have childcare. those kind of things. Most classes are £1, maybe. Some of them are free. And they go from like, there's cooking classes, there's IT skill classes, there's English classes. The class that I volunteered working with was for life in the UK. So that was for women who were trying to sit their citizenship test. I learned a lot in that class. It's a very in-depth content material that you really have to learn to be able to sit this test. And my mom actually had to sit the test a few months ago so that she could get her citizenship, because she's been working to get it as well. So, and then, social groups for women that just have lots of different activities. I ended up I ran a session alongside with a couple of other girls from my lacrosse team at Dundee Uni, and we ran a couple of sessions at the Women's Centre to get women involved in sports. We ran a couple of lacrosse sessions and did a couple of exercise classes, and that was really great because a lot of these women feel slightly isolated, I think. A lot of them are mothers, so they were married very young and they have lots of children, and they are in charge of everything. So they're in charge of childcare, houseware, cooking, all this kind of like unpaid labor. So being able to come to this center to drop their kids off at the daycare center and then take some time for them, I think is so, so important.
So you took that initiative to take that Dundee Sports Club to that center, and then
yes, yeah.
So that's, I call those kind of things like, these are like social capital, isn't it? So you have got something good, and they have got something good, and then if you can blend these two together, you can make things far, far better for both parties.
Yeah, it was really fun because lacrosse is I think an unknown sport. I had never played it or even really known what it was until I came to university, and I just went to the sports union fair during Freshers Week, and I signed up and I randomly went, and then I happened to love it. So I was on the team for 3 years and on the committee for 2 years. So because I was spending so much of my time volunteering at the Women's Centre and being on the committee for the lacrosse team, I just kind of thought these are such amazing groups of women that I think they could really benefit from each other by joining up. And it was really good. I think the girls on the committee of lacrosse that came and did it, they really enjoyed it. And then the women at the center that we brought it to, they also really enjoyed it. So it was just a really great experience.
I think that's a very good story.
A lot of them come from like Muslim communities, and integrating sports into those kind of things, I think there's a lot of barriers in place, not so much with the religion, but with just the accessibility of it. Like, for example, a lot of the women there don't feel like they can go to the gym because it's male and female mixed. So just little things like that, women from other cultures like me, I don't think about that. I just go to the gym and I don't have any adherence to that. Or like even just sportswear, finding things that work well with their religious clothing that they have to wear and that they want to wear, mixing that in a way that makes it accessible to sports. I think that's like an issue that really, really needs to be addressed, because these women, just because they have religious beliefs doesn't mean that they don't want to go out and play sports with their friends. It's just less accessible, and it's also less normal. Seeing a woman in a hijabi running down the street with a football. You don't really see that, but that doesn't mean that they don't want to do that. Volunteering at the Women's Centre was so eye-opening because it was, when you think about these women who aren't British nationals and they come here maybe 5 years ago or 10 years ago or 6 months ago, and they either come alone or they come with family members, it's really easy, I think, to generalize this group of people. When you think of refugees or migrants, it's really easy to just put them all into one group and generalize their experience as one. But it was extremely eye-opening being able to speak. So the classes that I would volunteer and teach at were 2 hours long, 2.5 hours long. And we would usually spend like the first hour and a half doing the actual class content. And then we would end up just speaking. We would sit at the table, and it was only ever me and maybe 6 other women. And we would just talk, and they would talk about, their experiences, especially the women at the Life in the UK class, because they were talking about how difficult it is trying to learn about this culture and this. There was one thing in particular. So the Life in the UK class is pretty much a UK life 101. So it's all about UK history, politics, pop culture, language, those kind of things. And it's a series of multiple choice questions. And it's extremely difficult for women or anybody whose English isn't their first language, because the way that the questions are formed, I don't want to say that they're trying to catch you out, but they are definitely trying to make sure that you have a really good understanding of English, because that's like one of the requirements for becoming a British national, is that you have like a certain level of English knowledge before you sit the test. And I remember this one specific example where the women were going through, so like we would do the content and then they would do practice tests and try and, go through the multiple choice questions to see how they were doing. And there was this one question about British culture, and the way it was worded was like, British culture are naturally accepting towards immigrants. And it was like true, false, and then like another one. And I remember looking over and being like, do you understand the question? It was two friends, and they looked at each other and they were like, yeah, like rolled their eyes, and then put true, because they knew that was what the answer was going to be. But for their experience, they were like, no, I don't feel welcomed. I don't feel accepted. And that was really interesting.
Because like one of the things like I will focus on today's talk is your long piece you wrote just a couple of weeks ago, Post-Truth politics. So we try to cover quite a bit on those areas. But we'll try to make it like more like accessible, so that not to make it too dense, not to make it too technical, so that basically we are doing this post-truth politics and then understanding of this like theme in such a way so that even your grandma can understand.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to share, your Dundee University's memory?
Just, my experience of working with those women really, really opened my eyes, and I think confirmed I'd always thought and kind of knew that I wanted to work in the nonprofit type of sector. I even when I was a kid and I thought about what I wanted to be when I was older, even though it wasn't like I want to change the world or I want to work for the UN, it was always working with people. I think growing up in so many different cultures and seeing so many different types of people, I just couldn't understand how we lived in a world that was so easy to marginalize groups. And I completely am aware of my privilege and the amazing opportunities that I was given from the minute I was born. I kind of won like a lottery ticket, having my mom and having my dad and having the opportunities that were going to unfold for my life. And they have absolutely put me where I am today. But I just couldn't, I think that just angered me, because I was like, well, why do some people not have the same opportunities that I have? Just because they maybe look different or because they speak a different language. Like when I lived in Mexico, I from a very young age, I became fluent in Spanish, and I stupidly stopped speaking it by the time I was 10 because I thought it was embarrassing to speak Spanish. And like, it was just these little things. Me and my mom would usually speak Spanish to each other, and when we lived in Mexico and Colombia and stuff, because that was the language I was being taught in, and all my friends spoke Spanish. So it was just easy to keep that up. And then when we were in Texas and I would hear people say slurs to Mexicans, and I couldn't understand, because I was like, but these are people, these are human beings. I don't understand how you can hate someone, or how you can feel this like feeling of non-camaraderie kind of thing. It was so bizarre to me as a child, and even now is, how humans want so badly to separate themselves, because humans are tribal beings, but it's to the point where we're just like creating these labels just so that we can hate another person. And I hate that, because then it creates barriers and systemic institutions that make it more difficult for certain people to attain, you know, a standard of life that everyone deserves. No, you consider yourself to be an internationalist, and that's the exact same as me. I don't believe in borders and boundaries and these things that separate us human beings. I think we're so much more alike than we are different as any human beings. And I think if people were to take away the facade of like national and ethnic and cultural identity and really looked at each other as human beings. And I don't mean to say that, you know, we should wipe away people's cultural history or ethnic history. I think those are extremely important for, you know, civilization. I think people deserve to like wear and their cultural identity with pride, but to use it to separate themselves from other human beings, that's what I don't like. I don't consider, when people are like, oh, where are you from? It's such a loaded question, because I'm like, well, what does that mean? Are you asking where I was born, or where I feel like I've grown up the longest? Or because when people hear me and when people see me, I'm American, because my accent's a lot more American than it is Scottish. But then when I go to America, people are like, oh my God, you sound so Scottish. So, you know, no one's willing to like take me, essentially, because if I was to say that I was Scottish here, I would get some pretty nasty looks, and they would say, no, you're not Scottish. But I've lived in Scotland the longest. I've done all of my formative education here. But, you know, I couldn't claim that I was Latin American, even though I had spent a lot of time there. I definitely wouldn't claim that. But I'm equally American and British, but neither are like, it's strange. I think it's really, it is a privilege to be able to stand back and look at it from such a, you know, there's like a word for children that grew up the way that I did, and like we're called expat children. And I have a very similar upbringing to a lot of kids whose parents were like in the military or something, who were constantly moving. So that's kind of like the assumption, is that either your parents are in oil or they're in the military if you're a kid who moves around every year. But it's a really unique and I think extremely beneficial outlook to be able to, you know, look at the world without a constricting identity. I'm able to look at it from like an outsider perspective, which, you know, nobody's an outsider in the world. You know, we're all from the human race. We're all earthlings, I guess, if you will. So, but I have like a perspective that not many people have. A lot of people do, you know, there's a lot of expat children who grew up like me, who are a bit like, well, I don't really know where I'm from. I sound one thing, I look another thing. It's, you know, and it must be as well really confusing for children who, like British Indian children who have lived in the UK their whole life, but they don't particularly feel like they can call themselves British because they look a certain way and because their parents speak a certain way. And they, you know, it's those kind of things that it's such an interesting topic. And I do really enjoy speaking to people about it, because a lot of my friends are very patriotic, nationalist, kind of, they have these like really strong feelings towards their countries. And it's so interesting listening to them speak about it, because I just have I can't relate. You know, like I think I do get defensive when people say, like when I hear American people say like, oh, the UK is so-and-so. And I'm like, whoa, that's, you know, that's totally unfair. And the same way when British people, you know, generalize Americans, and then I get defensive, but I don't feel like a patriotic, I don't even know what to call it, like a responsibility, I guess, towards any country, because I don't have a country. I'm a nomad.
I mean, that's like one of the like funniest story, you know, like bureaucratic form. It says like, you know, are you British? Then are you British Asian? Then it says the British Bangladeshi or British Indian. Or so. I mean, you can see there is a tendency that they really want to quantify me, who I am.
Yeah, they really do.
They really know who I am. You know, just tell me, man. So basically, sometimes I put that, you know, I put like just like write myself, put it like number 15. Don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the thing, is like, it's not only,
I don't know. I mean, no, who knows?
Yeah, exactly. And it's the same with like trying to, you know, the difference between race and nationality is such a touchy topic, because like you said, you know, your nationality is British, but you might be British Bangladeshi. So, you know, how does that change? You know, what does that change, and why does it need to be quantified?
Because I mean, I think part of the problem is, I mean, they really want to create that perception as well that, if you're British Bangladeshi, you are a bit lower than, higher. So there is some kind of hierarchy there.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's like, I mean, I don't know like whether they do it consciously, but it's a kind of subliminal message that, if you put like
and I think
numbers, then, you are a bit,
Exactly. And I think that definitely feeds into the way that people are just in general. They want to label you in every way. They want to give you a nationality. They want to give you a race. They want to give you a sexual orientation. And I think what makes human beings in general uncomfortable is when people start becoming fluid within those labels, and they don't want to be in a binary position of I am white, I am American, and I am a female. And when people start like going in between those boundaries, I think that's what makes people uncomfortable. Because people still ask me, they're like, okay, yeah, but you're American. And I'm like, well, who says, just because I sound slightly more American, I would probably say that like all of my cultural and pop cultural knowledge is a lot more Scottish than it is American right now, because I've spent the last 11 years of my life. I've spent half of my life in Scotland. So why is it so important that I have to put a label on my nationality? Because I don't have one, truly.
Well done.
Yeah. I think the common ground between all of the things and all the different phases that I went through of saying, this is what I want to do and this is why, it was all very people orientated. And I think when I was about 14, 15, that's when I really started to realize like, okay, I have a voice that I really enjoy using. And, it's not particularly that I want people to hear what I want to say. I want to be able to give other people the opportunity to speak their truth and to have their opportunity to have a voice. And that's kind of just what led me down the path of picking international relations to study. So that's like my degree is politics and international relations with Spanish. And picking that it was such a no-brainer. It's like I didn't even research it. It was just I always knew. My mom always said from like a really young age that I was going to be a diplomat because I liked speaking to people and I could always see both sides to every story. So I'm still open to the idea, if I ever do that. But the international relations kind of thing, it was like I read it really quickly and then I was like, oh, of course. I've always been extremely outspoken. I guess a lot of my friends would say I have a lot of opinions on a lot of things and I don't believe in... I believe in respecting people's opinions for sure, but I also believe in standing up for what I believe in. And I think in Orkney, that was really hard because Orkney, and I think with any small community, people, you want to be polite and you don't want to rub people the wrong way. And, you'd rather be quiet and reserved and just like not upset anybody. And I also think that's like a big difference between American and British culture. Just like stereotypically, Americans are very like outspoken and just like, this is what I believe. And this is, I don't care what you think. Whereas the British stereotypically, again, are just a lot more reserved and classy and, just that kind of thing. So that was really hard in Orkney because I had all of these opinions as a young woman as well. And everyone was like, okay, calm down. Like, it's not a big deal. It was like I was turning on the news and I would be speaking to my friends about this and I just wanted to shake them because I was like, do you not see what I'm seeing? This is crazy. The world is crazy. How can you not want to just spend all of your time trying to fix the shit that's going on?
One of the things I always tell my students, like doing a degree like politics, international relations, one thing it does, it builds up your critical thinking. And that's the most important thing you need for your life. And if you can't think critically, people will hire you because they need smart people, isn't it?
Yeah.
So like we started our journey with this, like our topic issue, which is like post-truth politics. Can you just like give us a bit of understanding about like, what does it mean, like post-truth? Can you like explain in a very layman's term?
Yeah. So post-truth politics or just post-truth essentially is the decrease of value of facts and information, like factual information, over the appeal to emotions. So essentially, it means that it's a theory, it's a concept, it's a confusing kind of thing, because it's a new concept. The pretense isn't new. The appealing to emotions over facts is not new, and trying to manipulate people to vote in a certain way, that's not new. But the term post-truth is new. It was actually made Word of the Year in 2016 by the Oxford Dictionary, which I think says a lot, considering 2016 was a pretty pivotal year for the concept of post-truth, with Brexit and Donald Trump being elected in the United States. So it's difficult, I think, because a lot of people assume that post-truth is just the same as, politicians lying, or, spreading bullshit about a certain topic. And I think that there's definitely a distinction between post-truthers, I guess, the people that spread post-truth narratives, and liars, is that post-truthers completely subvert the possibility of a different reality than the one that they're saying. And that can be seen, Donald Trump is probably the most obvious manifestation of post-truth, with the way that he takes absolutely no responsibility for any of the claims that he says, regardless of when they're completely debunked. And, he's faced with facts that, you can't argue with a fact. If it's a fact, it's a fact. But that's the importance and the respect, I think, towards facts, particularly in liberal democracies, has been faltering in the past few years. And it definitely has some serious impacts on the way that liberal democracies function, at their core.
Just a couple of technicalities, so Oxford Dictionary made it like the word of the year. I think it became word of the year if there is a sudden surge of uses of that word.
Yeah.
So I think the surge was 2,000% rise of the uses of the particular word. It's just unbelievable. The facts are not important anymore. Mm-hmm. And you don't have to take responsibility. And if you say something, what can you do?
I think for functioning liberal democracies to happen, we don't need to agree on everything. We don't need to hold the same beliefs, and we don't need to have the same opinions on things that are happening. But we do need to have a shared understanding of what is what and what is actually happening. Whereas post-truth completely changes the reality that people are living. And, no wonder these people are so polarized, and why they can't seem to find a middle ground, because they're living in different realities. They're not talking about the same facts and the same surroundings. It's like having a conversation with a brick wall, because the other isn't able to understand why you have an opinion on something, because your understanding of that belief is built upon something that they don't have access to. So the factual information. And I mean, it's the same with there's definitely a difference between taking two different ideological groups, taking different stances and different narratives on the same facts. That's what politics is, I think, in my opinion, is just people talking about the same information and the same reality, but spinning it in different ways. So taking a different stance on it. So climate change is an example. But then when Donald Trump comes in with his post-truth tactics of completely subverting the reality of what climate change is and the facts surrounding it, that's why people have this such strong belief that it's a hoax, because one person's truth and one person's reality is another's hoax and lie. And I think that's really, really dangerous for liberal democracies, because, liberal democracies are built upon people making informed decisions so that their government and elected officials can operate smoothly and fairly and freely. And this new trend of post-truth politics completely subverts that process, and it's scary. And that's definitely why I chose to write about it.
Try to unpack a couple of other things, a couple of other terminologies. So post-truth is linked with social media. Post-truth is linked with something called algorithms. Post-truth is linked with something called echo chamber. Can you just give us some like more basic understanding about this couple of terms.
Yeah. So social media, I think, when it was in the process of being created, there was so many great ideas of what it could be. And I think the creators of these sites really thought that it was going to be a bridge for people to communicate. It was going to open up new avenues of information for people to get that they might not otherwise have access to. And the same goes for like the internet. There was like this plethora of opportunities that social media and the internet kind of made people hopeful for. And the reality of it has been slightly different. Social media, in the way that it's phrased, you think it's going to be a social entity. You're going to be socializing with people. You're going to be communicating in these ways. But because of these things called algorithms, which pretty much create a mathematical equation of what you are as a user. So you pretty much get like a profile made about you, and they then estimate and decide what information you're most likely to agree with, and what you're most likely to enjoy reading. So yeah, it's a complicated. Okay, so maybe I should start with the algorithms. So yeah, algorithms create a profile about a user. And what that then means is that any information that you see on your newsfeed and on your social media sites, like when you open the page and you start scrolling, everything that you're seeing is based on what the algorithm has decided you are going to see. It's the newsfeed algorithm, I think, was only introduced in 2012. And before that, it was just everybody that you were friends with, whatever they posted first is what would come up first. But then when marketing and advertisement revenue started becoming a really great way for social media sites to make money, they started realizing that actually it's better business to give the user what they're going to enjoy reading. So the more likes and comments and shares that a post gets, the better it is for the social media site, because that's positive interaction with a site, even if it's like a negative comment. So, like if you're a person who the algorithm has very quickly figured out that you might be in a Republican-based community and that you might be inclined to vote more Republican most of the time, it's going to quickly hone in on that and give you a lot of Fox News articles. It's going to give you a lot of information about pro-law and order and pro-crime and punishment and all this kind of things that you're just constantly going to see. And it's very subtle, and it doesn't feel like you're being brainwashed. I think that's like because the thing is, this information, it's not like it's not accessible to everybody, but when it's fed to you primarily, you're not going to go out of your way to go look for another opinion, because you just log on, you see these informations, you see that your friends have commented and liked this, and maybe Facebook suggests that you join a group that is Blue Lives Matter, those kind of things. It slowly puts you into this category. And it, like we were saying, it quantifies you into this like binary group that it can easily predict. And social media just wants to predict what you're going to like. So the easier it is to do that, the better you are as a user for them to make money off of, because then the more that you like and watch videos, the more advertising revenue they get. And the same goes for, if you're really liberal, they will subscribe you to the New York Times or Vox or anything like that, because those are the kind of things that you're going to agree with.
Basically what it does, it creates this box, which is like echo chamber, isn't it?
Yeah.
You're just getting the same stuff, the things you like.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it puts you in this like bubble, essentially, where your ideas are being bounced back to you, because you might have, it's so subtle as well. You don't need to explicitly say that you're a Trump supporter, but just the tiny little behaviors that they can then put all together. So like if you are a police officer and you live in Alabama and you go to rallies, or maybe you like looked at a picture for 5 seconds longer than another picture that was anti-abortion and pro-life and those kind of things, it will put all of this information together and be like, okay, so this is, what you're politically inclined to believe. And then that's how they are able to sway you and also like make you have more extreme views. Because when you're constantly being heard your opinions back to you constantly, it reinforces your beliefs, because you're like, okay, I'm not the only person that believes this. Everybody else thinks that I'm right. We must all be right. And then it like strengthens this belief that they have. And then, that's how extremist views can come about. This psychological theory, essentially called selective exposure, whereby people don't like to surround themselves or get information that they don't agree with. So, 50 years ago, when people got their news predominantly from newspapers, you wouldn't go out and buy a newspaper that you didn't align your beliefs with. People buy subscribed newspapers that, would write things that they could understand and that they could agree with, and that just like reaffirmed their beliefs about their worldview kind of thing. And now with social media, that choice isn't being made. We're not making that choice anymore. We're not actively being able to pick up that newspaper, because one day somebody might think, oh, you know what? I constantly read this newspaper. Let me just pick up this other one this week, see what's different, see maybe if I get another point of view. Whereas that choice has kind of been taken away from us because of newsfeed algorithms. We would have to actively go out. And the thing is, even when you actively go out to Google search something, you and I could Google the exact same thing and we would get different things, because, all of the information would still be there. But my first page of Google, also, I don't know anybody else that Googles something and then looks all the way down and then goes to the second page. You just go to the first like 3 or 4 things that Google gives you, because you're like, oh, well, that's the most relevant to me. But because we're so different, we probably have very different newsfeed algorithms, and our user types are probably very different. We would search something like climate change is, and then it would come up with a whole different set of things. So like if I was to Google climate change is, and then my Aunt Sharon in Louisiana was to Google climate change is, we would get completely different search results. So that's the thing, is like even the information that you're trying to seek out, it's still skewed. It's still based on, it's tailored for your user experience to be as amicable and digestible as possible, because that is what makes good money.
So like 2 things here. Like one is like information. There are millions of information, but the problem is these algorithms create some kind of structure there.
Yeah.
What kind of information
and I think
you get?
And I think when people were making these newsfeed algorithms, they did truly think that it was going to be beneficial for people, because they thought, this is just going to streamline the way that people receive their news and their information. It's just going to make it a lot more efficient. People are going to be able to weed out the information they kind of don't want to see. But I don't think they quite realized and could predict the dangers that this had, because it completely puts you in this like narrow chamber of information that you have been decided by a big company in LA that this is what you're going to see, and this is all you're going to see. And if you want to see something else, you really, really have to dig. And not many people are willing to do that, because they're like, well, I don't want to make myself uncomfortable by reading something that I don't agree with. Like a lot of people that are, I think the pro-life and pro-choice are really good examples, because it's such a personal argument and it's such a personal belief that people have. And I think when you're faced with reading something, especially when it's based on facts, from the pro-choice movement, when they're giving the pro-life people factual information, it's extremely uncomfortable and they don't want to read it. They're like, well, no, because this goes against my religion and my beliefs and, whatever, so and so. And it's extremely difficult to speak to people about these kind of issues when they have this like barrier up of just like, nope, I don't want to hear it. This is my belief. This is my truth. I'm comfortable in it. It's like people are comfortable in their compliance and their stupidity, and they're not interested in maybe asking uncomfortable questions, because their whole belief about their world will crumble because their reality is constructed by post-truth.
Things we talked about, like coming to university and then build up this kind of confidence and, work on with this idea about critical thinking. So when you talk about post-truth society, post-truth politics, that's the end of critical thinking, isn't it?
Yeah, completely.
And the problem is there is a slippery slope there as well. So if you live in that bubble, then it can go all other places as well, like, conspiracy theories.
Yep.
And then, like pseudoscience and all those, bad stuff, which can be dangerous for society, for your well-being as well.
I think there's definitely a growing trend with post-truth politics, kind of coincides very nicely with conspiracy theories. And I think it mainly stems from a growing trend of anti-establishment thinking. And I think, all conspiracy theories come from that. It's people on the fringe of society who feel already outside of, maybe they don't understand something or they don't want to believe what the reality is, that they go to the fringe and then they say, actually, I don't believe what my government is telling me, because they already feel like outsiders. So they want other people to come and feel like they're the ones that are right. It's like this, they're put on this like higher power of, they feel so good about themselves for being, greater than thou, being able to like really understand what the government is doing. And that was the biggest reason why I chose this topic for my dissertation, was because of the summer that COVID was starting. I was faced with a lot of people who were believing conspiracy theories, and these were people with like degrees and well-respected people in the community, that were talking about these things that were just so incorrect. And I was just like, I didn't know how to have a conversation with them, because immediately my initial response was just like, I would tense up and I would get angry and I would just want to like say, no, you're so wrong. Let me show you why you're wrong. But then I really quickly realized that that was the absolute quickest way to shut down a conversation. And then I really had to try and listen and figure out why these people believe these certain things, like anti-vaccine hoax, like the one that Bill Gates was the one that was like in charge of releasing COVID-19 into the world, and that the vaccines were just a way for them to track us, and that Black Lives Matter was a satanic cult, things like that these people truly believed. And I was just like, there has to be a reason deeper than they're stupid, because I think I truly have a belief that people are just innately good. And I don't think people initially want to do bad. So I kind of have to level with them and think, okay, these people are human beings just like me, and they're passionate about something. What led them to this point? And then I started going back and learning more about how the internet is such a great opportunity in a lot of ways, but also such a hindering blockade of information. Like the internet kind of opened up the information age, but it, yes and no. I think social media is equally as negative as it is positive. So that was definitely how this topic kind of caught my interest so much, was because I was like, I really want to understand the inner workings of these people and why they believe these things so passionately, just as passionately as I believe this. And it's because we're living in different realities. They are living in a reality built up by post-truth. And thankfully, I am living in a reality that is based on facts and, the respect and of a shared understanding of facts in society.
One of the things you touched briefly is the faith in our institutions, the traditional institutions. So obviously the post-truth politics is very much linked to it. This idea about the serious erosion of, our traditional institutions. So we don't trust them anymore. Because they told lies after lies. So how many wars in America went with lies?
I know.
Just like basic example. It looks like the public policy, the people who were making public policy, they were to blame as well.
Yeah, definitely. It's the thing is, like, post-truth politics, I think there's a split between academia, whether post-truth politics is new or not. I think it's a newer version of something that has been around. It's like an amplified, more dangerous version of something that, when used in the past, it was a lot more isolated. Whereas now, because of social media, post-truth politics is able to just like disseminate in such a way that wasn't possible before. And I think it just makes it so much more dangerous. And it's really scary. But I think, and I mentioned this in my dissertation, that believe in one version of the truth. Like, I don't think that there needs to be like an authoritarian version of the truth that everybody needs to adhere to. But I do think that there needs to be much more appreciation and respect towards a shared understanding of facts. I don't think people can have, you can have an opinion about a fact, but that doesn't debunk the fact. Just because you don't like a fact doesn't, the fact that eating too much bread isn't healthy for you, I don't like that at all. But that doesn't change the fact that eating too much bread isn't good for you.
That's a good example. Sometimes I try to tell my stories as well, because I suffer from OCD, and the rule for me, my therapist always tells me that don't search in Google with you.
Yeah.
because I tend to get like anxieties from those Google searches as well. So I don't know, perhaps my profile is built such a way through these algorithms, they will feed me with like negative things. So basically they'll tell you that you'll die, man.
Yeah, fear driven. Yeah, like if you Google your symptoms or something.
But I mean, the problem with the post-truth politics is, you have to live with these people as well, 74 million people. But the other side of the story is there is a serious danger as well. So if you just let it take its own course, if you don't disrupt those things, because the conspiracy theories and other things can come in. Like one example I always try to give, in terms of conspiracy theories used to normally it's in the like popular culture, but no one took them seriously.
Yeah.
Most of the time it's comical as well. It's a kind of entertainment. But in the past, if you go back to like Black Death, 25 million people died during this like Black Death. So that's like half of the population gone. I was in Strasbourg a couple of years ago. So that's like French city. When I was going to different places like museum, other places, one thing I learned that in Strasbourg, year 1349, they burned 2,000 Jews alive.
Wow.
Because there was a theory going on that Jews are to blame for this Black Death. Because one of the conspiracy theories was the Jews were contaminating the wells, the public wells, so that they can drink water. And also the conspiracy theory built stronger because suddenly they found that the Jews were actually dying less from this Black Death. Which is linked with something else, which is linked with actually anti-Semitism, because Jews are isolated, so this is like socially distanced. They're living in their own area, and also like through like Judaism, there are lots of like rituals as well. You have to wash your hands and all those things. Yeah. But if you think it structurally, it makes sense why Jews are dying less. Yeah. But they created that conspiracy theory, and Strasbourg, when it happened, 1349, Strasbourg was yet to get infected with the, this like plague. So they preempted.
Wow.
You see, so the conspiracy theory became real, became suddenly scientific, and then you took action. You see, so that's the problem. So if you allow this to peddle, and then if it infiltrates in all part of your society, then it became serious. We're talking about serious violence here.
And I think America has so many examples of conspiracy theories that have kind of gotten out of hand. The vaccine conspiracy theories, where people are actively not getting their children vaccinating, and that, although it's not an act of violence or, a tangible act, the consequences that it has for children and families and people who can't get vaccinated, or people who are just already vulnerable to these types of diseases, it's extremely dangerous. And it's really sad to see that these people aren't willing to, the idea that vaccinating your children will give them autism but they equate autism to be much worse than death of measles or the smallpox or polio. It's that, like, it's such a skewed, and that's what it is. It's that anti-establishment. They don't trust the medical corporations that are putting these vaccines together. They already have a mistrust towards them. So then they're able to use that, like, anti-establishment, which therefore means anti-expert advice and expert opinions, so that when they get facts like from the CDC about coronavirus, they're like, well, no, I don't believe you because you're big pharma and you're gonna give me all these chemicals to put in my body. Like, I should get medical freedom to say no.
It's a kind of couple of combination of things, the total erosion of traditional institutions, because there are evidences that big farmers, these big companies, big private enterprises,
completely,
which colluded with the government, and then they made serious amount of money at the cost of people's lives. Yeah,
it's one of those things, I think, that once an idea is planted in a community or in an echo bubble, like, it disseminates so quickly, and trying to get somebody to believe otherwise is so difficult, because post-truth politics enables the believer to just put up a wall and say, no, anything that you say isn't real, or that these facts are alternative facts, or whatever they want to call it. They have no interest in of understanding that this is factual information. And the thing is, like, I'm not a doctor. I can't. That's I think why I really wanted to focus my dissertation on something that I could understand at, like, a level that wasn't vaccines, because I don't have a medical background. I don't know anything about it. But I do trust what is told to me by the CDC and by the UK government when they're telling me to stay safe and to wear a mask and to keep my distance and those kind of things, get vaccinated when I get called to get vaccinated. Whereas there's people who, have this preconceived notion of what these institutions are trying to do to us, which is negative, because they already feel that the government is out to get them or whatever it is. When they're told to do these things for the betterment of themselves and also just society, they don't want to do it, because they think, no, I don't want to put this unknown thing in my body. It's the whole issue with, like, vaccines and medical freedom, with all that, I think it's such a complex conversation that I think more medical practitioners need to become involved in, because it's all well and good me being well known with post-truth politics and, like, dealing with people with extremist views and trying to, like, speak over the divide that there is. But there's only so far that I can go, because I don't have a medical background.
But, like, one thing, for me, at the end of the day, if there is if there is a conflict between pseudoscience and science, I will always take side with the science. I will always take side with the science of medicine, because that's structured knowledge, systemic knowledge.
Yeah. It's verifiable. It's like, it's approved by other, that's the thing, is, like, peer reviewed is so important in medicine, because people on Facebook will share these, like, doctors who are now anti-vaccine, and they're, like, talking how COVID is a hoax, and they're sharing these publications that they've done, but they're completely discredited by other doctors. Like, immediately you go on it and it's, like, not peer reviewed. This is not verifiable information. Please do not believe this. But because it's a doctor saying it, they're like, see, this is a doctor talking about this. I know what I'm talking about.
That's the problem with this, like, post-truth politics, because whatever evidence you have, scientific evidence, it doesn't matter.
Exactly.
You cannot convince them. They might say that, that's your opinion.
Yeah.
It's one of the, like, funny stories. It's quite dangerous story as well. So this, like, post-truth, this, like, this conspiracy theorist, Alex Jones, so, like, Alex Jones has got millions of followers. So I think last year, the start of this pandemic in, like, March, April. So he was selling toothpaste and some kind of diet he created. Okay. And he was saying that this toothpaste can actually kill not only coronavirus, but this version of any kind of virus like SARS and he used the word, a specific word. It can kill those virus at point blank range. That's the exact words he used. I mean,
Wow.
he was so bad. He was checked out from like Twitter, from like YouTube and all the social media. But still, I mean, they couldn't stop him. I think at the end, they actually took him to court that stop selling this toothpaste, man.
Yeah.
And then he more or less stopped. You know?
Yeah. I think that's like I'm pretty sure he's a radio show host. Yeah. And that's, the best place for people who are spewing post-truth narratives to be on, because it's so hard to like constrain it. Social media, obviously it took so long for Twitter and Facebook to finally put an end to Donald Trump's spew of just absolute lies, bullshit, post-truth, whatever you want to call it. It was just, everything was wrong. And it took a while for that to be like put a cap on, I guess you could say. But when you think about these far right people who aren't allowed on social media anymore, and also the type of audiences that they're trying to get to, which are people who are maybe like in lower income, already feel marginalized from society, want someone to blame their problems on. They turn on the radio when they're going to work or when they're doing housework or whatever, and these people are saying, this is what the problem is, this is how you can, feel better. Like, come and believe what I believe, because then all of your beliefs about the world will be reaffirmed and you'll be the one who's in the right, and, all that kind of stuff.
So like people like Alex Jones, I mean, try to fix this so-called chaos created by this traditional structure of the government. And then Trump came up with this idea that he can be the fixer. He can fix it. Drain the swamp, isn't it?
Yeah.
Drain the swamp. I mean, I think he used like, couple of thousand times in 3 weeks before the election in 2016. And then the rest of the 4 years, he used this drain only, I think, 75 times.
Wow.
Can you just because I mean, you are the expert here on this like post-truth politics. I mean, one of the things I still don't get it, because this is the guy who told that, I will drain the swamp. I will drain this, this like Wall Street and all those people from this administration, from this, this like bureaucracy, but once he's in, he did the exact same thing. But that did not stop his people
from continuing to support him. Yeah. I think the success of post-truth politicians lies in the fact that they gain this support that's like unanimous and just kind of unwavering. So once Donald Trump got his support from the people by telling them what they wanted to hear, by saying that like immigration was the biggest problem US had to deal with, and that to make more money we had to drain the swamp, all of those claims, the completely baseless claims that he said, once he got their attention and got their support, that was it. Anything that he did afterwards, because the nature of post-truth is that anything that you don't want to deal with or that you don't want to take responsibility for, you don't have to. And anything that you want to be true simply is. So like, if I was a post-truther, I could quickly say, I have blonde hair, and anything that you say that goes against that, I'm not going to believe, because I believe it. I want to believe it. That's my reality now. And, it's just completely false. So I think that it was one of those things that like once Donald Trump got that such strong, extreme support from people, and that was so emotionally charged as well, it wasn't based on facts and it wasn't based on the reality of what America was facing. It was based on emotions. They were tired and sick of feeling marginalized and like the forgotten white people. It's so ridiculous to even say it, but this is what these people felt. They were so angry, and Donald Trump gave them he was pretty much their vessel for their anger. And once he had their support, he was able to do whatever. So I don't think they had they had no intention of holding him accountable ever. Because that's the thing, Donald Trump never, ever held himself accountable. He was always the president that said, when he was faced with something, he would just be like, oh, well, no, that's, I don't want to answer that question next. Or he would speak down to reporters and, that kind of thing. And his supporters knew exactly who they were voting for. So I think they understood. And there are a lot of people who voted for Donald Trump and then maybe a year later were like, oh my God, what did I do? I can't believe I was so engrossed in this like Trump era of information that it wasn't until they like came out of it that they were able to see what they'd done. So yeah.
So I think it's like a combination of things, like post-truth politics, plus emotion, plus tribalism, all these like toxic things.
Yep.
Became
it's like creates the perfect storm.
Perfect storm, Donald Trump. Then more or less he became the symbol of that thing. So whatever he does, that's the truth, basically. Though he was doing the exact opposite thing, which was he supposed to do. It doesn't matter anymore.
Exactly.
Even like a couple of examples, like before the election, he was saying that, I will detach my business from my actual job from presidency.
Yeah.
But if you see that, like, when you talk about fact checkers, I mean, you found that, he used his business interest or personal interest 4,000 times during his 4 years time period.
Wow.
That gets more problematic, isn't it? It's not only post-truth. The problem is then you create this like demigod, and then who can get away with like serious things? I mean,
I think there's a definite trend, like what you said, with him being a demigod, where politicians are seen as idols and celebrities and these, these people that we are looking up to. But it's like somewhere we've forgotten that politicians are meant to be working for us. They're civil servants. They're meant to be literally working for us, but we see them as these like higher power individuals that can do anything and that can get away with anything. And I do think that it's because of a long history of that being the case. Politicians have been able to sweep things under the rug, very little consequences. And, that's true with on the left and the right. Politics has always been, I think, considered like a slimy kind of thing to get into, and politicians are liars and all this kind of thing. But it has completely shifted, I think, with the emergence of Donald Trump. He was something that nobody could predict and that we've never seen anything like before. It was like a whole new manifestation of, like you said, all of these different things coming together and creating this perfect storm, which was Donald Trump becoming president in 2016. Like, who saw that coming? I remember staying up in the middle of the night watching the coverage and just like my mouth was wide open the entire time because I was just like, how has this happened? How have we let this manifest in such a way?
One of my the poignant moment of teaching is I went to one of the tutorial sessions I was teaching, and on that day basically we knew that Trump got elected. And this particular student, I mean, she was crying in the class. That how could people vote for this person who did those things against women, against people, against society.
Literally anybody that isn't white men.
I mean, she's not like American. And she felt this amount of, emotion that, why, this thing happened.
I think as well, the fact that it was against Hillary Clinton, somebody who really had a possibility of being the first female president of the United States. I think that was a really, really big hit to see that how misogynistic people still were. It felt, me and Mom, I was crying when I was watching it. I didn't go to school. I took like half the day off of school because I was just like, I've been up all night. I'm so emotionally drained. I don't even know what to say to people as well, because I was 16. So, people at school, so many people didn't care. They were just like, oh, I didn't even know this was happening. They weren't really interested in politics. But it felt like such a hit to, have 8 years of the first African-American president really felt like, okay, this is change, this is happening. But then to realize that, the minute that a woman is put, and for a woman to lose against Donald Trump as well was just beyond, it was like incomprehensible, that it felt like such a step back for everything that might have been accomplished. And, the things that they were saying about Hillary Clinton, whatever your beliefs are with her. There's, I'm not saying that she was a perfect politician in any way. And I also do have an issue, I think, with politics that runs through families, like the Clintons and the Bushes, just that like lineage of politicians. I don't really believe in that, because they're not representing the everyday people. They're representing, like they can't relate. They can't, I think politicians, like I said, they're civil servants. They should be working for us. And when they come from the top 1% families, it's really hard to kind of like get behind them and, get that they understand what everyday Americans and everyday citizens are going through. So yeah, that was a really big hit from a Democrat point of view. To have that loss, that was a loss. But then also from like the woman feminist side of it, that was another big hit.
And then we more or less we took that journey, like 4 years journey. It's quite chaotic, total chaos from the very beginning.
Completely. I just remember I'm glad almost that it happened when I was 16, because that was that's such a formative year when I was applying for universities, and I was really trying to figure out what it was, because I knew that I had a voice and I knew I wanted to say things, and it was almost like a catalyst. It was like that charge that I needed to really push me and be like, there is so much crap going on in the world, and this is just like one of the biggest manifestations of the perfect storm that's happened. Like, do something. Don't waste your time. Don't do something insignificant. And I think that's what I really want to make sure that I spend my life's work doing is, making a change, whatever that is, I think for the better. There's so many issues in the world that it can sometimes be really overwhelming as somebody who like wants to make a change, because you're like, oh my God, there's climate change. There's misogyny, there's racism, there's all of these different things that are happening. Like, what do I choose? But I think if every one person picked one thing that they just wanted to improve in society, and it doesn't even have to be like internationally. That's definitely what I learned most from volunteering at a Dundee local International Women's Center, was that, think globally, think about making global changes, but act locally, because that's where the change happens, is in the small grassroots organizations. And that's how this systemic change happens.
We talked quite a lot. I mean, well done. I mean, I think you did.
Yeah, it's been good. I really like having these conversations. It's so interesting.
I think it's amazing. I mean, one of the things, I mean, when you started your dissertation, I mean, I really wanted to give you extreme freedom, because I saw it, the emotion, the goodwill, and then the urge to learn, to do the research. And you were like scrambling for books and all those things. And then I tried to, bring books for you, like from nowhere. And then I saw the excitement. I think that was the best part for me. And then the end product was so good. I mean, I think I am very proud of that piece of work. And also, this is your work. I think you did amazing work.
Thank you so much. I mean, I think as a student, I had an idea of what writing a dissertation was going to be like. And I thought it was going to be daunting and awful and the hardest thing I've ever done. And it was one of those things that, because I had read so much in the first semester, that's all I did was trying to form opinions, because I thought I had opinions about things. And then I would read more and more. And like you said, it was just critical thinking about these preconceived notions that I had to challenge and, understand why this issue is such an issue. And these are people at the end of the day, these are people. That half of the population that voted for Trump, they are still human beings that have these beliefs. And I want to understand, I want to level with them and find a middle ground as to why they're believing these things just as strongly as I am, because I believe that everybody has a right to their own opinions completely. But it was one of those things, I was writing it, and because I so enjoyed the topic, it didn't feel like work. And it was one of those things, I was back in Orkney writing it, and it was like one day because I started writing all the chapters on individual Word documents. And then it was like one day after 3 weeks, I was like, okay, I'm just going to put it all together and like start formatting it, because I felt like I had writer's block, and I was just like, I need to do some things. I'll put it all together. And all of a sudden I had like 8,000 words. And I was just like, oh my God, when did I write all of this? Like, and it was because it was so enjoyable. I would just sit down and write. And it really, truly wasn't as awful as I thought it was going to be. It wasn't awful at all, actually. It was just a lot of time and organization, definitely, making sure that I had a good idea of like what I needed to get done by when. And then it was just like I blinked and all of a sudden I had a dissertation.
I mean, especially like one of the things like for my future students, because one thing I saw in you is you're very disciplined. You are very structured. Yeah. And you kind of preempt as well. So you kind of foresee your future. Yeah. And then you can see like you did not struggle with your deadline. You didn't struggle with any particular things. It just seamless, isn't it? The whole execution was seamless.
Yeah, it was. And I think I am a very type A personality. So I'm very organized. I like structure. I like organization. And that's probably, if we're getting like psychological into it, it's probably because of the upbringing I had, where I had no control and no structure, that I cling to that like structure that I can create in my life. So having like regimens that I follow, especially with studying, I like that structure and I really like being organized. It's something that I don't find to be a chore. And the thing is, like, I completely understand that there's a lot of students who are able to like crunch and work under high pressure situations, and they actually can turn out really great pieces of work under limited time spaces. I just know I'm not one of those. And I also really don't enjoy the stress of like being under pressure. I would just rather be preemptive, like you said, and organized, try and plan everything, which, I think over the past few years, I've really started to realize that like there's very little I can control. Myself, I am the only thing that I can control. So I like to have plans and organization around me, and yeah, I'm a bit of a neat freak and all that kind of stuff.
One of the things I really don't want to, finish the session with like, this uncertain future, and there's no kind of reconciliation between the right left politics. I mean, what's the way forward? Because it looks like it will be difficult for Biden to like reconcile, isn't it?
Oh, completely. And I don't think it's going to come just from him either. Like, I think it's this is such a
serious.
It's an issue. Yeah, it's like an issue that affects every single sector of society. It's not. It's multifaceted, I guess, if you will, and I think and I mentioned this in my dissertation really briefly in the conclusion, because I can't claim to say that I have the answer and I have the solution, that the governments need to follow this blueprint to civilization greatness. But I do think that the first step needs to be the way that we're getting this information is primarily through social media and through the newsfeed algorithm. So I think that they need to be adjusted in a way that don't create a type of citizen that is only getting their information based off of what they believe. So I think the newsfeed algorithm needs to be adjusted that isn't putting the needs of the social media sites and like the people that run them and their advertising revenues ahead of the user and the user's experience. And I think like their priority is to create a seamless user experience, which at start, they probably thought that, why would people want to see news articles that they don't agree with? But now it's created this like complacent citizen. So I think they need to readjust what they claim to be priorities for the user. I think that the priority needs to be that the users are well informed and that they're not being given like one-sided propaganda. I also think that there needs to be teaching and education at a very, very young age about how to differentiate between true, reliable sources and unreliable sources. that was never, and I think because the internet is so quickly evolving that like it's really hard for schools and education to kind of catch up to figure out how to teach students about something that, you know, a lot of teachers don't even understand themselves. But I think that it needs to be integrated into education where students are taught at a very young age how to, you know, figure out what's real and what's not real, because it can be extremely confusing for people who aren't, you know, either one or the other, to go on to like Google or Facebook and get all of this different information and just be bombarded. And they're like, well, I don't even know what's real. I don't know what's real anymore because everybody says that the other one is lying. So who can I believe? So I think that needs to be like definitely prioritized in education. And also just like a respect towards the institutionalized experts. They're experts for a reason. These are people that have information, you know, they're not telling us about climate change for their health. They're trying to help society and, you know, mankind. But so, yeah, I think those are like the three things that need to happen in order for any type of change. And I don't think it has to be unilateral. I think all three of those things need to change at the same time for things to, you know, move forward positively. If only one happens, the other things are still going to be impacting and it's going to be negative and stuff. So, yeah.
I mean, the way I see, like, you know, this idea about like knowledge is not easy. It needs, you know, that extra work, you know. So,
yeah, there's one of my favorite quotes is, knowledge is not power, applied knowledge is power. You go on social media and then you read a news article heading and you think that you know the story. And then you're like, okay, yeah, I'm knowledgeable about that fact. But it isn't until that you apply that knowledge and actually read about it, confirm it, try and, you know, also critically think about it, not just be this like vessel for information that you're just taking in and not critically thinking about it. That's, I think, like you said, that's what makes a citizen and a democracy really well operating.
Part of me, like, I mean, the way I see democracy is not built on truth. Democracy is built on debate, built on diverse ideas about society. And then, you know, it's like permutation and combination. Then you end up with like something which can, you know, everyone will be kind of happy with that. Yeah, I can take it. No, I can sacrifice a bit. They can sacrifice a bit, and we can have a society.
Exactly. Because, and I think it's completely impossible to imagine a society that all believes one thing and that there's complete agreement on something. Everybody deserves to have their own beliefs and opinions and all that kind of stuff. But I do think that the basis and shared understanding of facts is like the best way for society to be able to have these debates about, you know, like we said, you can have opinions about facts and, you know, debate those opinions, have conversations about them with other people and talk over this divide that is so wide in America and in the UK. You know, this isn't just isolated to, I mean, it's so prevalent, I think, in liberal democracies currently because of, you know, the features of post-truth politics are really quite synonymous with authoritarian regimes. And I think that's why it's so scary to see it happening in liberal democracies, because, you know, the whole point of a liberal democracy is that it is not authoritarian regime. You know, it is a democracy for and by the people. But when post-truth politics has taken force, it's a bit like, oh, well, you know, the people are misinformed, they're manipulated. And, you know, can democracy survive under this type of rule?
Two stories, I mean, I really want to say, I mean, I tend to tell, you know, we are teachers, we tell lots of stories to our students that can make them, you know, like to understand the bigger picture. So the one story is, you know, idea about like, this like knowledge gathering. It's not easy, first of all. It takes time. It takes, you know, your serious effort as well. So one example is like when Plato was a student of Socrates, he was a student for 10 years. So that's the minimum time you need to, you know, to perfect knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And it did not stop there. And then Aristotle came. Aristotle became a student of Plato, but he was a student for 20 years.
Wow.
So when you talk about knowledge, that's the time, that's the effort you need. So the continuous debate, continuous consultation, continuous dialogue, these are important. Then you can have a society which is, you can have this idea about philosopher king. You can have actually philosopher king.
Yeah.
So the bar is so high to have that ideal kind of society. But I mean, should we give up? No, we should strive for that kind of ideal. And I think eventually society will come to that point. Then people will say that, we really need a philosopher king. If there is a king, he has to be a philosopher.
Mm-hmm. I think that's, we definitely have the same believe in the good of humankind. I'm definitely not a cynical person. I'm very realistic with the things that are happening in the world, but I also do believe that human beings at their core are just good. And I think that people want to do good. They want to try and make the world a better place. It's just that when people have a different reality and concept of what that good means, that's when these like polarizations happen within societies, because it's difficult, but I think it's great. A perfect society in my mind does not mean everybody complacent with one idea and one belief. I think that it's great to have different opinions and different beliefs. And I think people need to be more open about actually having conversations. There's actually a book that I would recommend to you or anybody who's like interested in this kind of polarization within America, the UK, anywhere, and on any topic. It was written by a man who was raised in like a very Southern evangelical church, but he was gay. And he had to work through, those two such different, and he's a pastor now. So he's still, very much gay, but very much religious. And he had to grow up trying to bridge this divide about who he was. He had this like such internal conflict that he had to bridge together. And now he's like a professional speaker, and he helps people speak over the divide. I think that's what the book is called. I read it a couple of years ago when, Donald Trump was in full force and members of my family were very difficult to be around. And I wanted to try and figure out a way to, have meaningful conversations with them and, treat them with the respect that I want them to treat me with. I want to respect the fact that they have these beliefs, but I also want to, speak up for people that they're maybe being discriminatory against, those kind of things. So it's a really, really good book, and it's all about the speaking over the divide and finding a middle ground with people that you might not have thought possible. I'm not trying to like advocate for people with like extremist beliefs that are extremely discriminatory towards any type of group, but the only way to try and fix these problems is to talk and to communicate and to learn and listen, I think are the biggest things. So that book was really, really great in like opening my eyes about that concept of listening. Cause we think that we're such good debaters. But I think the best debaters are the ones that actually listen. I think you can definitely tell when somebody is taking part in a debate and only thinking of what they're going to say next, rather than taking in what the other person is saying, so that they can, fully understand where that person is coming from, so that they can then, put their argument forth.
Thank you. I mean, this is very insightful. I'll take a bit of another story, just to another good story about kindness and compassion for people, for society. So like Bob Marley, one of the musicians, he's got this famous song called No Woman, No Cry.
Yeah.
The background of this story is because when Bob Marley was growing up, very, very, the poor background, hardly any food there. There was a community kitchen there. And he used to go there, and the owner of that kitchen used to serve him soup and other things. And so that was his formation years. And then when he wrote this song, the part of the song came from that idea and the hope and things like that. And the royalty of the song, he gave the royalty of that song to that soup kitchen in that community.
Wow.
So they still get money from the song's royalty.
Wow, that's amazing. I didn't know that. So
that's the kindness, that's the compassion, isn't it? Rather than making money, making the profit. So the profit has got limit, isn't it? The social media and all those things. We're talking billions of dollars. So I think we need some kind of responsibility there. So this is the singer who could have made money, or like family made money from this song, but he thought that just give this thing, very special thing to this community kitchen. And then can feed more people who can, create more musicians even.
Yeah. When you vote for selfish reasons rather than for the betterment of the entire society, that kind of blows my mind, because I'm like, well, why wouldn't you want to vote for, what's going to be better for everybody? Because in turn, it will benefit you, even though it's not going to benefit you maybe the exact same way that it might if you were making it for selfish reasons.
It's just like too much of everything is bad, isn't it?
Oh yeah, completely.
So I think this is the funny story. So I was looking for some like my OCD related Google search, that whether this thing is good or bad, isn't there? I mean, everything can be bad.
Yeah, in moderation.
It like depends on like how much you're taking it. So if you drink too much water, you'll die. You just say. If you think that I'll make $1 billion, it's fine, okay. But if you want to make like $1 trillion, that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I watched a video of she's a New York Senate, and she gave a talk about because she's pretty socialist. She's a Democrat, but she's pretty socialist, and she believes in the betterment of everybody rather than for one people. And she was talking about how nobody makes $1 billion. You take $1 billion. No one person can physically make $1 billion. But when you're exploiting workers and you've got this idea where you're not paying people fairly and you are benefiting solely on yourself, that's when you're taking $1 billion, but you're not making $1 billion. And the concept of a trillionaire that should be illegal. That shouldn't even be allowed, that much money for one person to have in their name. It's yeah.
Okay. A couple of things. I want to finish with. You are finishing your degree here. You did really well, and we are talking about you're looking for some postgrad thing now. So the future seems like very bright. Okay. So we are happy about that. But what will be your advice for the students who are coming to the university in the near future?
Honestly, read everything. Don't stick to trying to read only the things on reading lists to do with modules. I think using that as like a stepping stone is really good. And like, if you can learn how to critically think about something early on, your third and fourth year modules they're not going to feel like work. They're going to feel like enjoyment. You're just reading and writing things that you enjoy about, and you're critically thinking. And I think that reading is like the best way to do that. Reading for pleasure, reading for the things that you're trying to learn about, subscribing to newspapers, not just one either, trying to find ones that are, if you're very left wing, subscribe to those, but also try and find middle ground ones that provide you with a different viewpoint, and the same for people who might be right wing. Try and find that middle ground. It's hard, but I think it's important to get a really good overarching view that isn't one-sided and isn't stunted. I think if you have a one-sided view about something, it's fundamentally stunted. You're not going to be able to get a really good comprehension of the topic. So yeah. That's what I would say.
Great advice. The last point, where do you want to see yourself in 5 years' time?
I want to see myself helping people in a very proactive way. I really want to make sure that I'm working either for an organization, or I'm, maybe in 5 years I might have studied law to try and get more of a proactive approach to helping people, human rights wise. So I've just accepted my master's for Glasgow University to study human rights and international politics. So that will take me for a year, and I'm hoping afterwards throughout my master's study, I'm definitely going to be working alongside the human rights organizations within Glasgow, because it's, there's so many. So I'm hoping to work alongside them very closely and hopefully get a job afterwards, think about studying human rights law. But yeah, I know that I want to be helping people that don't have a voice, and trying to fight the systemic barriers that people are placed under for no reason, no tangible reasons, I think, and I just want to help them.
Good, thank you, Samantha.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Best wishes for your graduation.
Yeah, thank you.
We are having it online again, looks like. But at some point we'll try to catch up over coffee at some point.
Yeah, definitely.
And I would really love to meet your parents as well.
Yeah, well,
one thing we forget to do is these are the people who work behind the scene.
Yeah.
So what Samantha Buck today knows because of these people, this mother, this father.
It was actually your talk at the Dundee University Open Day that I went to. You met my mom. I know. And it was when we left that talk. And I remember because Dundee was so sunny that day, and I had already said no to Strathclyde. And I was, in between where I wanted to go, between this and Stirling and Aberdeen Uni. And we went to your talk, and then we walked outside on the sunny day, and we were like, yeah, this seems like a really great place. I think we should choose this one.
Oh my God.
Yeah, my mom knows you and she remembers you. Okay. So she would definitely like to meet you.
Thank you so much, Samantha.
Thank you. I really enjoyed this.
Pleasure. And then, the journey we made together with your dissertation and with your, working with you, I think you're such a gift, Thank
you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.